In the heart of Connecticut, a seemingly ordinary home harbors secrets so dark, they'd chill you to the bone. Imagine stepping into a house where the air is thick with the unseen, where every corner whisper tales of the departed, and shadows dance in the light. This isn't just any haunting. It's a place where the past and the present collide in the most terrifying ways, where objects vanish into thin air, and an apple's crisp bite turns to rot in your hand. A house that doesn't just haunt your dreams, but reaches out, touches you, and leaves you questioning what's real and what's beyond our understanding. Have you ever felt a chill run down your spine as if you're not alone? Or heard a voice so clear, you swear someone was there only to turn and find nothing but silence? This story takes us deep into the Snedeker family's nightmare, where even the walls seem to hold their breath, and a bed vibrates with the rhythm of a heart it shouldn't have. An invisible force, playful yet menacing, strips away any illusion of safety, leaving behind a trail of fear and unanswered questions. But what if the very fabric of your reality began to unravel? What if you too saw hands that weren't there, felt a weight on your bed with no one to be seen, or heard a music box that foretold unspeakable horrors? And in a moment of desperation, when all seems lost, the family reaches out to the infamous Ed and Lorraine Warren, only to find themselves plunged deeper into a mystery that defies explanation. Welcome to Retraced Echoes. Now let's go to Bert as he takes you through the twisted corridors of the Snedeker house, into a family's fight against forces that sought to tear them apart. Step closer, if you dare, as we peel back the veil on a tale that's as haunting as it is inexplicable.
Alan was a hard-working and dedicated father. Carmen, a nurturing and attentive mother. Between the two of them, they were the glue that held the family together. Each one of the kids had their own unique personalities. Jennifer, she was the oldest and was a natural leader. Alan Jr. and Bradley, they had kind of an adventurous personality. They were known for filling the house with laughter and the occasional mischief. Phillip, he was definitely the quiet observer. He was very thoughtful, very sensitive. For them, life was as ordinary as any family could possibly hope for. That was until there was a discovery that would set them on a path unlike any that they had walked before. It was a Friday afternoon, a day like any other, when Carmen noticed a small pea-sized lump on Philip's neck. The concern in her eyes was mirrored in Philip's confusion and fear. With the innocence of youth clouded by the fear of the unknown, the family's routine took a back seat to medical intervention. The visit to the doctor was filled with tension, a huge difference from the concerns that usually occupied their days. The doctor wanted to find out what this was, and together they made the decision to order a biopsy for the following Monday. This was marking the beginning of a waiting period which was filled with anxiety as well as with fear. Now, as the weekend passed, the lump on Philip's neck, it grew, morphing from the size of a pea to that of a golf ball. Now, how scary would that be for Carmen and for Alan? I can tell you how scary this would have been for the parents. Probably the scariest thing for us, whether we want to admit it or not, is something that happens to our children. In this case, you have Carmen that finds this pea-sized lump on Philip's neck, her son. I remember when I was a kid, I had a lump on my neck. It was significantly bigger. And they took me and they found out that it was some form of like an infection. So I remember that when I was a kid. Now I sit back and I think, what was my parents thinking when they saw that? This is a case where they see it. They go in, the doctor looks at it, and the doctor goes, something there. We definitely want to get this as a biopsy. Now, this was in the 1980s, right? That would have to be super scary for Carmen and for Alan. Then you go over the weekend, and as the weekend's coming by, it grows from the size of a pea to a size of a golf ball. Now, in addition to that, you have Philip. Think about it. Philip's got this thing on his neck. I still remember that lump on my neck when I was a kid, and I used to feel it. And I used to have to turn my neck a certain way. I think it was this side, and I think I had to obviously the only people that can see that is the people on YouTube. Sorry, those listening. I believe it was on the left-hand side of my neck. So for those of you listening, but I remember I used to have to turn my head, I believe, to the right, and then you could distinctly feel it. Now you've got Phillip. It starts out as this probably hard mass, this pea-sized mass. Just over the course of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it's now the size of a golf ball, right? Significantly bigger. How scary would that be for Phillip? Then you've got the 3 other kids in the household, right? Like, what were they thinking? What were they saying? Because I can tell you with my kids, whenever there's something going on with one kid, the other 2 will kind of treat the one kind of weird, is the best way that I can put it, right? Like, they don't want to talk about it and they want to be like, oh, everything's going to be okay. But I think to a degree that almost makes it worse for Phillip. I don't know. I had a lot of thoughts on this section of the story. But now when Monday came around, the family's fear had become a reality. Phillip was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a type of cancer within the immune system. Now, he was only given 6 months to live. Unfortunately, this was a very aggressive cancer, and they needed to begin treatments as quickly as possible. Carmen. She was a mother that was driven by a love that you cannot put into words, and she embarked on a journey that tested the limits of her strength, as well as her endurance. Phillip needed radiation therapy, which took them from New York to the University of Connecticut, which was a 306-mile round trip. Now, Phillip faced his cancer, the bravest that any 13-year-old could. But the physical toll of the cancer and the harsh treatments would also take its toll. The long drives to and from the hospital, even though it was needed, was excruciating. Every mile on the road was a reminder of the battle that he was fighting, a battle that was as much internal as it was against the disease that was ravishing his body. Now, for Alan, the situation demanded sacrifices that stretched him beyond his limits. He stretched himself thin, working every day as many hours as he could. But the family was feeling the financial burden. It was growing heavier with each passing day. The decision had to be made to hire a live-in babysitter. With Carmen dedicating her days to Phillip's treatments, Alan working as much as he could to provide for the family and these new expenses, someone needed to be there for Jennifer, Alan Jr., and for Bradley. As the days turned into weeks, Carmen's worry for Phillip's well-being intensified. The side effects of the chemotherapy and the radiation treatments, they were heavy, taking a huge toll on him. The once energetic boy now faced bouts of nausea and exhaustion so severe that the thought of the long car rides back and forth from the hospital filled them both with dread. Carmen hated watching Phillip suffer. In her mind, the drive for the treatments might just be too much for Phillip to handle if it continued. She also thought that the car rides itself might be what kills him first. Carmen spoke to Alan about the thoughts of maybe relocating to Connecticut to take that fear out of her mind. And Alan listened because he knew that she was right. So, they agreed to start looking for a place to rent. The idea of relocating closer to the hospital in Connecticut was a beacon of hope. Now it's easy to just say you're going to move somewhere. It's much more complicated to make the actual move. Connecticut's high cost of living was going to be a significant hurdle. Then on top of it, you have the size of their family. This was a family of 6 after all. One day while Carmen was driving through the neighborhoods near the hospital, she saw it. A sign that said for rent, and it was outside an old colonial house. The looks from the outside gave the hope that this might just be the miracle that they needed. Driven by a mixture of desperation and hope, Carmen saw potential in the old house. It would be about the perfect size by the looks of it. And it was relatively close to the hospital where Phillip was getting his treatments. With her heart racing, she booked a showing, eager to see if this could be the very answer to the prayers that they were asking for. Now, this rental was for a duplex in Hartford County and was built in 1916. The unit available was for the ground floor, which also included the basement down below. That was more than enough space for a family of 6 to live comfortably. However, when Carmen toured the house, one detail caught her attention. The basement, it was completely blocked off. Now, though she could not see what it held, She let her optimism and the need to settle her family closer to Phillip's medical care make that decision. Carmen and Alan made the leap to move their family into the house. Their first project was to renovate the basement. Now, their idea was to turn it into a livable space for Bradley and Phillip, providing them with a spot that they could call their own. The excitement of moving into a new home and the anticipation of creating a comfortable living space for Phillip and Bradley in the basement was abruptly shattered by Alan's grim discovery. What they found behind that previously blocked basement door was a scene that was far removed from the ordinary. The basement, once envisioned as a place of comfort and privacy for their sons, held proof of its past life as a funeral home. There were embalming tables, mortuary equipment, a chain and pulley for casket lifting, coffin handles, and even a blood drain pit. The sight of bloodstains on one of the walls was a stark, unnerving reminder of the activities that once took place here. Now, Alan, after discovering all this in the basement, was put into a sense of shock and disbelief. Now, that would soon turn into a deep sense of unease. The realization that their new home was once a space where the dead were prepared for their final journey, for him, was a lot to process. They found photographs of corpses, tags used to identify bodies, and personal items belonging to the deceased, which added layers of discomfort to a family that already had enough. As they walked to the back of the property, they found a small graveyard. Daryl Kern, the owner of the property, confirmed the house's history as Hallahan Funeral Homes. Now, this added a historical context to their disturbing findings. Now, Alan and Carmen, they spoke to all the neighbors, and they painted a picture of the Hallahan family as respectable members of the community. Now, the real estate agent, they claimed that they had told Carmen all about the house's history, which adds to the situation. The Snedekers were now faced with the realization that their new home, chosen out of necessity and hope, had a very morbid past that could easily have not been ignored. They attempted to get out of the lease, but it was too late. The realtor refused, and the family found themselves trapped in a situation that was quickly spiraling into a nightmare. Now, with limited money, they were forced to confront the reality of living in a house with a very dark and haunting history. Now, with no real choice, the Snedekers continued their efforts of transforming the basement into a living space for Phillip as well as for Bradley. A few days later, while cleaning up, Carmen was mopping the floor. This was a relatively simple task, but this ordinary chore took a very chilling turn. The water in the bucket turned deep red. It took on the appearance straight out of any horror story. The mop, when she lifted it up, oozed with a substance that was unmistakably the smell of decay. The sight and the smell was so unsettling that it sent shivers right down Carmen's spine. Looking for reassurance or maybe a reasonable explanation, Carmen turned to one of the workers that was at the house. Maybe they could shed some kind of light on why this would occur. All it took was a single glance at the blood-red water to have him fleeing from the premises. He never returned. The renovations were finally finished on June 30th of 1986. This marked the official move-in date for the family. Now, Alan's job in New York meant that he was often away from home. That left Carmen to manage the household and the weird events that were starting to increase. Phillip and Bradley, they were now settled into the basement rooms. The rooms that once served as a casket display and embalming rooms. Now, in an attempt to turn this new place into a home, Bradley and Phillip decided a much-needed game of hide-and-seek was needed. Bradley knew the perfect hiding spot as he climbed up into a gurney. Now, what started off as boys just being boys morphed into something significantly different. Phillip started spinning the gurney. Bradley did all that he could do to maintain some form of bravery, but that all suddenly changed as he was confronted with a terrifying experience. Now, as he spun around, strange figures and faces flashed before his eyes. A ghostly parade of faces that showed the house's morbid history. Now this is when Bradley reached a critical fear moment. He witnessed the things that nightmares are made of, and he was not the only one. Phillip in particular found himself at the center of most of the disturbing phenomena. He often heard voices. Now these voices, they didn't seem to be malevolent, but they also weren't benign. Now these ghostly whispers, in addition to the occasional glimpses of ghostly figures, marked a significant escalation in the supernatural activity that was happening within the home. Now Phillip's encounters with the supernatural reached an all-new level when he began hearing voices calling out to him from the darkness of the basement. He went to Carmen and pleaded to abandon the house. But Carmen, surprisingly enough, she didn't believe in ghosts. She dismissed Phillip's experience as imagination or, let's be honest, a little bit of stress. This left Phillip feeling isolated in his fear. The ghosts that Phillip and Bradley had encountered were not just disembodied voices. Now they saw a small boy wearing a Superman pajamas. He was flying around the basement. Now this figure was scary, but it was significantly different than the menacing vision of 3 figures clad in trench coats. On one occasion, the boys woke up in the middle of the night. They both fixed their eyes on a toy robot that rose into the air. It was thrown against the wall with such force that it shattered. Now the boys, they screamed. And Alan, he came running down the stairs. Once he saw the fragments of the toy on the ground, as well as the look on the boys' faces, he couldn't help but believe them. At least, if anything, he felt as though there was something there. Now Phillip's descriptions of the entity became increasingly detailed and disturbing. He described everything from a figure in a pinstripe tuxedo with white hair to a disembodied head that had a scar over its eye and an empty eye socket where the eye should be. Now the boys, they were terrified. They were so scared that they wanted to leave the lights on at night. The darkness had things that lurked. At least with the lights on, they felt a little bit more safe. However, Alan's approach to the high electricity bills and knowing that once all the lights were turned off, in his absence, the boys would just turn them back on, he did something that was a little bit different. He removed all the light bulbs from the basement, plunging the boys into darkness. Now with that being done, the light fixtures, now empty, began to exhibit unexplainable things. They would flash on and off and emit an eerie glow as if the house itself was rebelling against the darkness. Now in the shadowed depths of the Snedeker's haunted house, the lines between reality and the supernatural continued to blur. One night, Bradley experienced an event that would further unsettle the already tense atmosphere within the family home. He was awakened by the sound of the flickering of a light switch up and down. Bradley glanced over, and he saw what he thought was a glimpse of his sister Jennifer. She giggled as she ran up the stairway. It left Bradley in a mix of amusement and confusion. Now Bradley rushed to confront her. Whether it was a game or whether she was trying to scare him, he was going to retaliate. Now the house, with its creaking floors and its whispering walls, seemed to hold his breath as Bradley made his way up the stairway, only to be met with a truly confusing sight. His parents, awakened by the commotion, stood before him with expressions of concern. They assured him Jennifer had been asleep the whole time. Bradley's confusion spiraled into a very chilling realization that the figure he saw, the laugh that he heard, Bradley's confusion spiraled into a chilling realization. The figure he saw, the laughter he heard, could not have been his sister. The encounter left him grappling with questions and doubt. If this wasn't his sister, then he could never trust what he saw or what he heard going forward. As the hauntings in the house intensified, Phillip started dreading going home at all. Started begging his parents to let him stay there after all of his cancer treatments. It's crazy to think that the comfort and safety of a hospital, despite its association with this illness, felt more safe to him than his own home. Phillip's behavior underwent a huge transformation as he began to withdraw. He also started having bouts of anger. Now this was nothing like how the boy used to be. Started taking an interest in dark subjects. He began wearing leather and penning poetry about death and necrophilia, which was extremely alarming to Carmen and Alan. Now these things were not just typical teenage boy rebellion. And Carmen and Alan, they were desperate for answers. They sought professional help. They took Phillip to see both a psychiatrist as well as a religious counselor weekly, hoping to find some type of solution, or if anything, an explanation for a sudden change. Tammy, Phillip's cousin, was now staying with the family. Now, she read some of his very unsettling poems, and it left her very concerned. Now, initially, it was thought maybe it was just the cancer treatments that was causing these mood swings and disturbing behavior. However, when Carmen raised these concerns with Phillip's oncologist, she was met with confusion rather than confirmation. The doctor clarified that the mood swings, changes in personality, and the hallucinations were not known side effects for Phillip's treatments. As Phillip's behavior became increasingly volatile, his anger towards his siblings and his cousins created a lot of fear in the household. Now, this would isolate him even further. No one wanted to be around someone who was so unstable. On one occasion, Phillip attempted to break into his neighbor's house. Why, you might ask? To steal a gun which he intended to shoot Alan with. Now, the straw that broke the camel's back was when Phillip attacked Tammy and tried to get intimate. This was his cousin. This alarming incident led to Phillip's arrest and being told that he would need to have a psychiatric evaluation. Now, with that, he would need to be left there. As Carmen was leaving Phillip at the hospital, he gave her a very ominous warning. Now they're going to come after you. And he wasn't wrong about this. The paranormal activity within the home escalated dramatically, affecting Carmen and the children in profound and disturbing ways. Carmen would carefully set the table for dinner, each plate, each utensil placed with precision. She would turn her back for just a second, and when she would turn back around, she would find that everything vanished without a trace. Now, these disappearing acts became a sinister routine, leaving Carmen questioning her sanity as well as the safety within her home. Someone would take a bite of a crisp, fresh apple, and by the very next bite, it would be rotten. Now, apparitions, they became a common occurrence in the household. Yet, it was no less terrifying each time they would have a sighting. Family members would see figures walking through the house, figures that would vanish as soon as you would approach them, leaving, if anything, only a lingering sense of dread. The air was filled with the sound of disembodied voices, footsteps echoing in empty rooms, and noises that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. Now, Carmen recounted how the entity haunting their home would employ a deeply personal form of torment for her. It would mimic the voices of her children. It would then lure her into rooms by screaming for help. But once she would run into the room, she would not be met with her children, but with dark forces that would mock her and laugh, or they would hurl insults and profanities towards her. This manipulation of maternal instinct turned to a weapon of psychological terror, left Carmen feeling vulnerable as well as exposed. Now, the phenomena took a more menacing turn as the physical attacks began. Carmen's experience in the shower was absolutely terrifying. An unseen force, while she was in the shower, wrapped the shower curtain around her face, attempting to smother her. If it wasn't for Tammy rushing in and ripping the plastic from her face, that was the only thing that saved Carmen's life. The entity was now showing that it was not only willing to put the family to a constant state of fear, but it was willing to harm them. Fearing for their own safety, the family adopted a new policy of never being alone, even for tasks as routine as using the bathroom. At a minimum, there would need to be 2 people at all times. Visions of a thin figure with high cheekbones, long black hair, and empty black eyes haunted Carmen, alongside with a pinstripe suit figure that was previously tormenting Phillip. The children reported seeing these black-eyed figures as well, along with strange orbs and flickering lights that morphed into human forms. Right before their very eyes, Alan and Carmen's bedroom, it was not a place of comfort and rest. The couple reported that their bed would often vibrate intensely, emitting a sound and sensation eerily reminiscent of a heartbeat. Now, this escalated as the invisible forces would suddenly lift and violently yank the sheets right off their bed.
But the bed would begin to vibrate, And it would be a gentle vibration at first, and it got worse and worse. There were other things that happened. The bed, as Kelly said, had a pulse and a heartbeat.
Like a heartbeat, yeah.
And when you were in your bed, it would come and lift the covers and tug at them.
But there was a pulse and a heartbeat in the bed.
In the bed, and you could feel it. Someone else could go up and touch it and feel it. People that had not lived in the house.
Now, the haunting took a much more ominous turn with the introduction of music. Music that sounded like it came straight out of the 1930s. Alan, driven by a protective instinct and a fear for his family's safety, he would grab his gun and he would search the house. Where was this music coming from? He was always scared that he would mistakenly harm one of his own children in a misguided attempt to confront the unseen assailant. Now, to make things worse, the entity's interactions became more intimate and more menacing. On several occasions, Alan or Carmen would feel the weight of an unseen adult-sized presence sitting on the side of the bed. Now, these attacks, they were strategically isolating, targeting one while the other one slept, rendering the victim paralyzed and powerless to react. Tammy's experiences added a terrifying physical dimension to the entity's assaults. She described feeling what felt like hundreds of hands that were touching her body, a sensation so vivid that on one occasion, Carmen could see the impressions of a hand from inside Tammy's shirt, rubbing across her chest and up to her neck. The room would fill with the sound of disembodied voices and gusts of wind, further amplifying the terror of these encounters. Confronted with the undeniable malevolence of the entity haunting their home, the family recognized that they were dealing with a force beyond their understanding. The physical assaults, coupled with the psychological torment of their experience, led them to the conclusion that they were facing a demonic presence. Now, in desperation, as well as with fear, they turned to the church, hoping for divine intervention to rid their home of the evil that had taken hold. Now, the church was not a lot of help, at least not in my opinion. They were basically told to say the rosary prayer, to make sure they had the rosary on them at all times. Now, Tammy, who was at this point, she would do anything to stop what was occurring, started wearing the rosary as a necklace. One night, she was engulfed by a black cloud. In a very chilling display of supernatural force, the rosary levitated right off of her chest. It was then thrown across the room and shattered against the wall, its beads scattering like the remnants of her hopes for a simple resolution. Carmen started experiencing psychic attacks, which just added another layer to their ordeal. Overwhelmed by the consuming blackness, she would just collapse to the floor, her body cold to the touch, as if her very life was being drained from her. Now, during these episodes, she would describe being in a trance-like state, acutely aware of the negative entities that surrounded her. Now, despite the terror and the physical toll of these attacks, Carmen felt a sense of compassion for these lost souls, believing them as being trapped and suffering. Now, the family believed that these evil entities would follow them if they attempted to leave the house, and in return, that prevented them from even attempting to leave. They stayed at the location for 2 years. They endured the unimaginable, their lives a constant cycle of fear and vigilance. They slept together in the living room, just as a safety precaution. Now, the family knew their battle against the dark forces required intervention far beyond traditional means. The intensity and the persistence of the haunting compelled them to reach out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned paranormal investigators known for confronting demonic entities. Now, we've covered them many times in many cases across this channel. Now, upon their arrival, the Warrens and their team wasted no time in assessing the haunting that plagued the family. The Warrens, they moved in for 9 weeks, and their experiences while they were there were profound as well as disturbing. They reported physical attacks by unseen forces, including being pushed, slammed, slapped, and beaten. Clear indications that the house was under the influence of entities far more malevolent than mere ghosts and friendly spirits. Lorraine Warren mentioned that the demonic infestation started from heinous acts that were committed decades earlier. Now, according to her, employees from the funeral home had engaged in necrophilia, necromancy, and desecrating the bodies that they were meant to care for, and in doing so, inviting darkness into the house. Now, I've never done this in a podcast, but I feel as though I need to do this because it's such a deep subject. It's crucial to acknowledge that these claims, they lack any kind of concrete evidence. There was never a police report that was ever filed for this funeral home. But with that said, they were convinced of the demonic nature of the haunting. The Warrens sought the help of the Catholic Church, requesting an exorcism to cleanse the house. The church at first said that they had no interest in helping. This prompted the Warrens to advise Carmen and Alan to take their story public. Their hope was that the additional attention to the case would put pressure on the church to act. Now, despite their hesitation, the family agreed. In fact, much of the audio that you've heard today is thanks in part to this. Now, the family, they captured national attention, transforming their personal nightmare into a sensational story that attracted reporters and curious seekers to their doorsteps. However, the exposure came at a cost. The children faced bullying, lost friendships, and they were ostracized by their peers and community members that viewed their family claims with skepticism and just outright disbelief. Now, the extra attention, it worked. There was a pivotal day where 3 priests, 3 deacons. Now, obviously, their identity had been mostly kept secret. That's not uncommon. They gathered at the house to perform an exorcism, ridding the house of its demonic presences that had tormented them for nearly 2 years. As the ritual went on, the house seemed to resist, filling with an indescribable force that challenged the efforts of those gathering to expel the darkness. But as the final prayers were uttered in a collective amen, throughout the rooms, a shift occurred. The oppressive force that had been gripping the house, it was shattered, replaced by sudden and profound calm. It was as if the house itself had exhaled, releasing the pent-up energy of countless confrontations and fears. It was said that a statue of a Virgin Mary, brought in as a symbol of purity and protection, was found with its hands broken clean off as the ritual was completed. In the days that followed, the family made the decision to leave Connecticut behind, moving to Tennessee for a fresh start, free from the dark forces that had so deeply affected their lives. The tranquility that followed the exorcism seemed to confirm that whatever had haunted them had confined itself to the house and had not followed them to their new home. However, the widespread publicity surrounding their case had taken its toll. Again, the children suffered from bullying. They struggled to get new friends, and the community was struggling to understand or accept the reality of what the family had went through. Carmen's reflection on the ordeal revealed a complex mixture of relief and resentment. While she was grateful for the resolution of the supernatural affliction, she felt exploited by Ed and Lorraine Warren. She believed that the couple had prioritized their own fame and financial gain over the well-being of the family. Now, of all the stories that I've covered here on my podcast, this one had probably the most red flags. I'll be honest, I struggled to put this episode together as I myself had a lot of questions that I know would never be answered. My goal is, as always, to reach out to the families and see if anyone would be willing to maybe do an interview or tell their side of the story. Allow them to provide their narrative. Now, many of these cases, they're pretty old. It's impossible to get anyone that would be relevant to the case. And in this example, we're talking about a case that's from the 1980s. I feel as though I want to cover some of the red flags and some of the things that I found about this case that, if anything, could potentially raise a few eyebrows. Now, Daryl Kern, the owner of the property, along with several of the neighbors, have said that the haunting claim started when the family started facing financial difficulties, mostly when they started falling behind on rent. Now, this suggests a possible motive for fabricating a haunting, to garner sympathy or, if anything, to evade financial responsibilities. The skepticism is further fueled by neighbors asserting that the haunting was premeditated by Alan and Carmen as a scheme to avoid rent. Now, Sandy, she lived upstairs in the other part of the duplex. She stated that she never experienced any supernatural occurrences. I find that a little interesting because I would assume it wouldn't just be the downstairs floor and the basement. I would assume it would be the entire facility. Now understand, Sandy had close ties to Daryl Kern. She worked for him. But she also made an assertion that the family had been informed of the house's history as a funeral home, which adds, if anything, I hate to say it, another layer of doubt to the family's narrative. Now, to add to all of this, Carmen apparently told Sandy that she was being haunted by her father rather than by a demonic entity, which introduces further questions regarding the truth of the haunting. And then there was Ray Gorton. Now, his involvement was in documenting the family's experience, and that introduced a whole new dimension to the controversy. Now, he was commissioned to write a book about the haunting. Ray encountered inconsistencies and changing of the stories amongst the family members, and he said, amongst the Warrens. His revelations about the difficulty in obtaining any kind of coherent narrative, as well as he alleges that Ed Warren told him to make up parts of the stories for the sake of horror, have casted a lot of shadows of doubt in the authenticity of the claims. Now, there was also accusations against the neighbors of being paid off to discredit the story, coupled with Ed's alleged dismissal of the family's credibility raised concerns about the integrity of even the paranormal investigation. Now, according to Lorraine Warren, the critical documents and records from the case were lost in a flood. Now, Phillip, let's go back to him. His journey from battling cancer in a haunted house to living a full life, only to be revisited by the disease, adds a deeply human element to the story. His life after the haunting included him getting married, having children, and working as a trucker, reflects a desire to move forward from the shadows of his past. His passing at the very young age of 38 marks a sad chapter in his personal story, leaving behind a legacy intertwined with one of the most controversial hauntings in America. It's only fair to say that since the family left the property, all the other occupants after reported no paranormal disturbances, suggesting that if the house was indeed haunted, the activity was either unique to the family or it was successfully stopped thanks to the exorcism. Now, unfortunately, because of all the media, TV shows, movies, and so on, the property still to this day has visitors and enthusiasts seeking to connect with a story that captivated the nation. Now, the reality of what transpired in this Connecticut home is a puzzle with pieces that are missing and others that they just don't quite fit. On one hand, the haunting could be as real and terrifying as the family and the Warrens have described, a genuine encounter with malevolent forces beyond our understanding. On the other hand, skepticism and accusations of fabrication cast long shadows, suggesting that the events, they might have been exaggerated or completely made up for reasons that only those involved would know. Now, among the voices and stories, to me personally, Tammy's account stands out as being compelling. Her sincerity and the consistency of her experiences, as presented in interviews, lend a measure of credibility to the family's claims. For me, there's something in her demeanor and the way that she recounts what happened that resonates with authenticity, suggesting that regardless of the broader truths or fabrications, her fear and experiences were real to her. Now, regardless of where the truth lies, this story has woven itself into the very fabric of paranormal lore. It's captivated the imagination of believers and skeptics alike. It's a tale that's prompted us to question the nature of reality, the power of belief, and the possibility of the world beyond our own. Now, the family still deals with the story. Obviously, you have Hollywood that's made movies, TV shows. And I know the family still tells the story as being absolutely true. I personally hope for the family and everything that they've went through, their trials and tribulations, they find strength and happiness in the years to come. May they, as well as all of us, continue to strive for understanding. We have compassion and resilience in the face of the unknown. Now, as we wrap up this mysterious journey through the shadows of the Snedeker haunting, I want to extend my heartfelt thank you for joining me on this exploration of the unknown. The lines between the truth and deception, reality and illusion, have never seemed so thin. Wherever you're listening to your podcast, tell me in the comments, what do you think happened here? What do you believe, if anything, was real? What do you think was fake? Now, if your curiosity for mysteries and the unexplained is still burning, I have just the thing to keep that flame alive. Dive deeper into the realm of the unknown with my other podcast, Deceptive Reality. Each week, my friend and I, we peel back layers of some of the most compelling unsolved mysteries that have puzzled minds and sparked debates around the world. Trust me, it's amazing. The last 2 Fridays, we've put out 2 episodes just for funsies. Is the moon real or is the moon fake? It was supposed to be just a fun one. I've never in my life seen so many backyard scientists in my entire life. But be sure to join us as we question the accepted, challenge the official narratives, and explore the depths of deceptive realities that surround us. And remember, in a world where the truth can be as elusive as a ghost in a haunted Connecticut home, keep your wits about you, your rosary beads close. Just make sure that they're not prone to sudden unexplained levitation. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and perhaps more importantly, if you find yourself in a house with a history of necromancy, maybe don't stay the night. Until next time, this is Bert signing off. Good.